Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It is time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. That's me. I am coming at you on September 4th through the 10th for the astrology, and we got a dream coming at you for the end of the podcast. Now, I'm going to break the fourth wall just a little bit because you're not going to hear from Zoe during the astrology portion of today's podcast because they're not here. You'll hear them in the dream segment because we recorded a dream 2 weeks ago to include in this week's podcast. And just because of schedules and busyness, I am recording this on my own during the middle of the week. In fact, we're in the full moon of this breaking the fourth wall here, kids. It's the full moon in Pisces. And besides the the schedule shifts and stuff, I've been traveling. I'm a little under the weather. My ass is being kicked by this full moon. So I'm in a bit of a state, but here we are to bring you the astrology for September 4th. But we'll start, as we usually do, with a question. This week's question comes from Deborah May, and I want to just point out that, and I love the questions. I love that they keep coming, kids. So please feel free to submit questions. And I'm getting to a point where there's a backlog of questions. For the first bunch of weeks that I did questions, there was, a smooth arrival of one question a week, and now I've got a little bit of a backlog, so it might take a couple of weeks to get to your questions. Please keep them coming, and I will get to them as I can. So Deborah May writes, "Hi, Michael. Your weekly podcast continues to be my guiding light forward. I'm so grateful for you for providing astrological insights that are also great teachings of how to understand my individual chart and life journey. Last week, you mentioned the word stellium in reference to a group of planets gathering under the same sign in a chart. Does it matter how many planets are grouped under one sign? I once overheard someone saying they were a quadruple Cancer because they had 4 planets in Cancer. Yeah, no, that's not quite right. I have 5 planets in Cancer. Does this mean that I am a quintuple Cancer or merely that there is a stellium in my chart? Furthermore, is there any particular meaning given to having so much energy in a single sign in one's chart at the time of birth? Sending warm love and blessings, Deborah May." So, let's start with the stellium. Stellium means 3 or more together. When 2 planets are near each other at the time of birth, we call that a conjunction. Now, 2 planets can be thought of as conjunct if they're as close as like 8 degrees. That's called the orb of influence. So a true conjunction is 2 planets at exactly the same point. But if they're a handful of degrees apart, we still call it a conjunction. Now, that handful of degrees is important because a conjunction becomes a stellium the moment there is a third or more planet close enough to the grouping to be called a stellium. That means that they all have to be within, I'm going to say, 6 degrees apart. So, like, if you have lots of planets in Cancer, but one's at like 2 and one's at 5 and one's at like 21, that's not a stellium to the 21-degree planet, only the 2 and the 5, right? They have to be close. They have to be, let's just say, for the sake of this, teaching, within 6 degrees of each other. So that's what we mean by stellium. It always simply refers to more than 2 and up to as many as the cosmos will allow of planets close together within a couple of degrees. Now, when someone says that they are a quadruple Cancer because they have 4 planets in Cancer, they don't understand astrology. A triple Cancer or a double Cancer, or in any sign, refers to the personal triangle of sun, moon, and rising sign. So to use the terminology double or triple anything, that's referring to having the sun and the moon and the rising all in one sign. Triple of anything's pretty rare, but I've seen it. Mostly people are double something. Sun and moon in the same sign, sun and rising in the same sign. That we would call, that person would be a double or a triple Cancer in this case. But just having a bunch of planets in Cancer does not make anybody a quadruple anything. It just means they have a stellium, unless, of course, we're talking about Cancer sun, Cancer rising, and or Cancer moon. So the last sort of piece of your question, Deborah May, was, is there any particular meaning given to having so much energy in a single sign in one's chart at the time of birth? Not from a standard, here's what that means, but certainly when considering a chart, the weight of an archetype's presence is increased if you have more than one planet in that archetype. And so, yeah, you would certainly make note of how much Cancer energy you have, but there isn't a specific meaning associated with that. It would just be individual, chart to chart to chart, that anyone looking at their chart trying to understand and contextualize who they are through that map would have to have the consideration of, gee, what does it mean for me that I have so many planets in a particular sign? You know, sometimes people will ask me, well, what does it mean if I have 4 planets in Cancer? And my answer will often be, well, why don't you tell me what it means? Because you're in that body that has those planets in Cancer. You know more about that than I would. Look to your own embodied experience, learn what the archetypes mean and what the planets represent, and you can answer the question, what is the meaning of having so much energy in a single sign in your chart? Don't look to astrology for the standard answer. Use the astrology principles to sort of guide your query, and then use your own self-knowledge to truly answer what that means. So we're probably going to have a slightly shorter episode this week, partly because there's a little bit less to talk about than there is in other weeks, and also partly because I really am energetically challenged on the day that I'm recording this. And so I'm going to give you the basics, and I'm just grateful that I have enough energy to present something to y'all for this week of September 4th. And the big news as we start the week is that yesterday, Venus went direct. So we talked about this at the end of last week's podcast, but I want to talk about it again because we really have an important month or so left in Venus's cycle, because as of yesterday when she turned around, she started what we call the direct shadow. Direct meaning Venus is now moving direct. She's no longer backward. She's no longer in the unconscious. So she's ready to deliver to our conscious awareness themes that she's been working on in the unconscious for the last 5 weeks or so. So between yesterday and October 6th, she's wrapping up everything that she covered during her backward motion, which was from July 23rd through yesterday, September 3rd. So those themes are healing, number one. Venus trined Chiron 2 times, and she'll do it again at the end of September. So that means that the planet of love has been interacting with the planet that brings deep healing in a very open geometry. So the healing has been, I was going to say easy, but I shouldn't say easy. I was going to say graceful, but I don't know that it was graceful for everybody. 2 planets in a triangle are undeniably in harmony. So we have all been through a healing, whether that was painful or easy. The trine to Chiron means a healing. A square to Jupiter has made the whole emotional process a little over the top. And while that has probably been intense for a lot of us, I think there's benefit in being in an emotional process and have the emotions heightened a little bit so that we can see the patterning easier. A square to Uranus, the great awakener that makes things happen suddenly and without anticipation. And so lots of endings, beginnings, and sudden changes and pivots in relationship status. That might return at the end of September as well. The great eliminator angle between Venus and Neptune was like the fog being revealed, seeing relationship dynamics for what they really are. And there were a couple of delusions revealed, I'm sure, for some of you. And a conjunction to Black Moon Lilith also meant that the shadow material was like deeply opened up. So all of the themes that I just described will be part of our September and the early part of October, with the distinction that we are different. We are changed from Venus having been in the underworld for so many weeks. And the transits as they arise between yesterday and October 6th will provide us with an opportunity to wrap up, make some sense out of stuff, and put a bow on it, hopefully. So just know and understand, though she's no longer retrograde, we're still in the process pretty deeply. Another thing to say about Venus that impacts the entire week ahead is that she's at 12 degrees of Leo, and she ain't moving. She came to this position on August 29th while retrograde and stopped moving. Then on the 3rd, yesterday, she turned around, but she ain't appearing to move. She won't get to 13 degrees of Leo till September 10th. So while she's now direct, and that's going to bring some more emotional stability to our experience, the fact that she's not moving all week does mean that emotions will be tender, a little bit more potentially reactive because of that sort of non-movement of the planet of love. But there's also the objectivity that she carries by virtue of not moving. We will have opportunities to make some emotional decisions in the week ahead from a more emotionally objective place. That's possible as well. But just understand, we have more to glean from Venus's process. So continue paying attention to your emotional patterning, your relationship dynamics, and how you relate to finances for the rest of this month. Outside of what Venus is doing, it's really all about Mercury this week, because Mercury is still backwards facing. Mercury is fully in his retrograde cycle. Today, in fact, has Mercury retrograde trining Jupiter. In a vacuum, this is actually a fairly positive communicative transit because the geometry is harmonious and it's Mercury thought and perception in a harmonious relationship with abundance, prosperity, and expansion. So this is actually a day where communication can feel sort of connected to largesse and optimism and confidence. You want to glance back to August 9th, give or take a day or two, and if there's anything interesting in your communication or your perceptions in that sort of August 8th, 9th, 10th period, there might be a connection to things that are happening yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Again, this is one of the more positive transits of the Mercury cycle. But Jupiter always has the shadow artifact of over-the-topness. That's what you want to look for. If nothing jumps out at you at that August 9th date about you sort of going over the top with expression or something coming at you that's a little over the top, then don't bother trying to connect the dots. Don't force it. But if there was, pay attention to stuff that's coming up yesterday, today, and tomorrow that might connect to that sort of over-the-topness or big reaction. And understand that at the end of the month, we're going to hit this again to wrap up for the third and final time. Now, on Wednesday, there are two Mercury experiences. So I'm going to start with the triple transit, and then I'm going to talk about the inferior conjunction with the sun. Now, today's Mercury transit might be positive and expansive, but Wednesday's is not. It's a shit show between Mercury and Pluto. The sesquisquare, the 135-degree angle of frustration and bother, is not strong geometry. It can't create anything and it can't break anything, but it can signal a sort of friction that's challenging for us. This hit back on August 8th, and then again this Wednesday, one more time at the end of September, which I'll talk about in that podcast week. This is a transit that usually inspires the shadow of Pluto in communication, which is things like passive aggression, manipulation, trying to get your needs met in a sideways way, which I guess is just another way of describing manipulation. So if you had a kerfuffle around August 7th, 8th, or 9th, that might return thematically this week on Wednesday, so pay attention. This is one where I really expect you to find something from that second week in August, because this was one of the juicier Mercury triple transits. Power struggles are probably another general theme that you can expect with Mercury and Pluto in a sesquisquare, because Pluto is the planet that holds our sense of power and authority, and like, who has it? Now, there's something hugely important happening that same day, Wednesday of this week. It's called the inferior conjunction. It happens at the midway point of every Mercury retrograde cycle, where the Sun and the retrograding Mercury come together by conjunction. Now, Mercury and the Sun are never very far from each other because Mercury is so close to the Sun, and from our perspective, he can't be but 17 or 18 degrees on either side of the Sun ever. So that means every time he goes retrograde, at some point, he connects with the Sun, and it's always the exact midpoint of his backward motion. Now, the Sun and Mercury are not the same thing, though they sometimes seem like it. The Sun is the center of our conscious awareness itself. It's the I amness of us, the beingness of us, like the sun up there in the sky that burns consistently, steadily, and never really changes. The Sun consciousness is that awareness that is solid, consistent, and never changing in us. Then Mercury is this little thing that just flies around the Sun, talking about it, what it's doing. Hello, I'm here, let's talk about it, let's talk about it. And we identify with Mercury because we hear the voice inside our heads. We see the voices shared with others that move our lives to the next step. So our perceptions, our communication, and our thoughts seem like they are everything, but in fact, the everything of us is the Sun, the conscious awareness that integrates that which is happening around it. So when Mercury, in his backward motion, steeped in the unconscious and delivering material to us above our conscious awareness level that is sometimes challenging or bumpy or knocks us on our ass because he's down below the surface, delivers some direct awareness to our conscious awareness, the Sun, when they come together like this. I sometimes call this the aha moment of the retrograde cycle. And the assignment is pay attention to everything on Wednesday. Remember that Mercury is a trickster. So sometimes this information, it will come from sideways ways or happy accidents or wild synchronicities. And just know that you might get some clues as to what this Mercury retrograde is designing for you in particular. So it's interesting to me that on the day that we have this aha moment available to us, we also have Mercury agitating Pluto, giving us the potential for a power struggle, a passive-aggressive approach, an impulse to manipulate when we want to, move in the direction of direct communication. It's a great moment to get glimpses into some of the material that might be challenging you right now in thought, patterns, and perception difficulties. So understand that as we move through Wednesday with a little bit on Tuesday and Thursday, important information about what you're learning about yourself on the unconscious levels, pay attention to everything. Now on Saturday, there's another sesquisquare for Mercury, that agitating geometry that means friction and bother is present. Only this is Mercury sesquisquaring the north node of the moon. This is about trying to get your agenda furthered. You know, the north node is our North Star. It's where we're trying to get to next. Mercury is our thoughts and perceptions. That's how we guide ourselves through life. So anytime that Mercury is making contact with the North Node, then we are in some manner of thought, perception, and communication about where we want to go next. Only the geometry says it's about frustration and bother and things not working the way we wish or desire. August 8th is the date to look back at for this. So that includes the 7th and the 9th, relatively speaking. And this is another important sort of moment. Now, August 8th and 9th is when these two, agitations occurred between Mercury and the Sun. I mean, Mercury and the North Node and Mercury and Pluto. So juicy couple of days in early August might be playing out this week. Look back to have a better, more graceful experience of what you're going to be learning about your communication and perceptions this week and into the weekend. One last little thing to mention is just Friday. It happens to be a big energy kind of day. And so it's worthy of talking about because there's an over-the-top bigness energy with the sun trining Jupiter. Yummy, in fact, conscious awareness. And the planet that represents abundance, prosperity, and expansion in harmony means we are just bursting with expansion, confidence, optimism. It's a yummy and lovely transit. Except at the same time, Mars is going to sesquisquare. That's the third time I'm mentioning this geometry today. Mars is going to sesquisquare Uranus, the great awakener, the planet that's responsible for sudden, unexpected experiences and consciousness that knocks us on our ass. This is a transit of reactivity, of impulsivity that maybe doesn't go well, of accidents, quite literally. In my daily Astro Alert subscription, you can bet that Friday's Daily Astro Alert will say, move slow, kids. This is the day you'll drop things or get into accidents if you're not mindful about how you're moving. Mars is the planet that represents our bodies and our movement. And this setup with Uranus means that anything can happen and probably will. And the geometry suggests frustration more than unexpected joyful things. Though that is possible with the sun trining Jupiter at the same time. So I want to present a little bit of a warning for the end of this week as we move into the weekend. Just move slowly and mindfully enough so that you can tap into the joy, confidence, and expansion that sun trine Jupiter offers without getting sort of hit by the bus that Mars sesquisquaring Uranus has to offer. Meanwhile, pay attention to everything this week, both in your mind and in your heart, and have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily Astro Alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily Astro Alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Okay, we have an email and dream from Courtney. She sent in a couple, but this one has a castle, so I'm just going to go with that one. So
It's because you like castles and just.
I don't know. I just don't think I've
right.
seen a castle. And golf. I don't think we've heard golf either. So
Okay, castles and golf.
yeah. So Courtney says, I was driving with my dad around an old castle that was transformed into a hotel. He was telling me about a fancy golf trip he was going on with his friends and told me that my grandma used to golf there when it was just piles of dirt. We drive up to the entrance of the hotel and there's a Rolls-Royce limo that seemed to stretch on forever. I thought, someone fancy must be getting married. Good for them. All of a sudden, I'm on a higher up floor in the hotel, looking at an outside set of spiraling brick stairs that went around the side of the hotel. There were a bunch of brides and a wedding party that followed. I then was about to watch a movie with my sister and her family, but I really didn't want to, and I was annoyed. I look over and notice two cats that are fornicating and thought it was so weird but hilarious. I have no clue how to interpret this. Please help, Courtney. It's so random. I would also be really confused.
And that's the end of the dream.
Yeah. Just
Right.
we get these dreams sometimes that feel like a Jackson Pollock of things, you know?
Yeah, a little bit. So in when that happens, my approach is to just inch my way through the dream story and sort of offer tidbits of meaning as I go and we build a story about the story, right? So if she's driving with her dad, we certainly know that Courtney's in some consideration of ideas about life that are generational. We know this too because later there's a grandmother in the dream being mentioned, right? So we know that the dream's beginning tells us I'm in old consciousness, castle. Remember, homes are always about self, and one could even think of this castle as representing the ancient, multi-generational consciousness that Courtney has that come through her father, as represented by this very old home image of castle. But it's been transformed into a hotel now. So now we know that we're in a hotel dream. Even though the setting is a castle.
Which is transient things.
Yes, transient sense of self that's in consideration of a change that's happening to and through the sense of self. And we know that we're talking about sense of self today that is multi-generational because Courtney's with her dad, and dad talks about something that he's doing in this space that goes back to grandma. Grandma did this when it was a pile of dirt. Like, that's almost like saying, we've always done it this way.
And
because there's golf in there, go ahead.
That's exactly what I was about to ask. What is golf?
Well, ultimately, golf is a leisure activity. So somehow this dream can't be about multi-generational approaches to leisure time. So I'm a little I'm not off-put by this, but I am more grabbed not by the golf game as much as the comment about Dad's golf trip somehow connecting to Grandma used to golf there when it was a pile of dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm not going to be able to come up with some interpretation of golf that's going to gobsmack everybody listening, which I certainly wish I could because that's pleasurable, to me, it's more like we've always done it this way. Grandma did it this way. I do it this way. And then, Courtney, play around with your associations with your father and his relationship with golf for like more distinctions about like why golf. But for my money, it's more juicy that what's being told here isn't so much about Dad wants to play golf, but Dad is doing something that Grandma did, therefore Courtney does.
Mm.
So maybe the golf is like a trickster image to stand in for ways that Courtney behaves because of her father, because of his mother. So then we get into the whole second act of the dream, which is about marriage. So this could be reflecting things in Courtney about relationship dynamics that she has based on how she was parented, based on how they were parented. And a marriage dream can also just be about integration of masculine and feminine because that's a symbol of marriage. Spiral stairs do suggest the way in which patterns continually repeat themselves in our experience. We talk about this a lot in shadow work consciousness, that we feel like we're circling right back to where we were in the past, but we are in fact spiraling back to where we were in the past in similar territory, but up a little higher, which means we are evolving, but returning to the same patterns in a spiral. That makes me want to go back and say, yeah, I think we're in a dream about what love looks like in Courtney's life based on what her parents taught her about love and what their parents taught them about love. And the spiral staircase suggests the repeating patterns that we consistently have to come back to. And the integration that's, required along the way. That's the bunch of, brides in a wedding party. That the idea is to marry masculine and feminine so that in the spiraling of investigating our consciousness, we come into more integration. What I love about the movie piece is like her sister is showing her, here's what it looks like to be stuck in the family dynamic. And Courtney's not interested in that. Does that make sense, Zoe, why I'm saying that?
Yes. Family.
Right. Family movie is like we're doing the scripted play.
Got it.
So for the way I'm holding this dream right now, I'm seeing Courtney exploring the cyclical patterns that she's working on getting better at. And then what she's turning away from is just staying stuck in that family dynamic as represented in this dream by her sister and her sister's family watching a movie that she didn't want to watch. That's like saying, nope, I'm not doing the same dynamic just because it was handed to be my generational past.
Mm.
So that then leaves us with the two fornicating cats, which what I love about that is that that's a symbol of integration. Two cats fucking are still two energies coming together to create a transcendent third, even if it's going to be a kitty, not necessarily something else. So the dream ending with an intercourse experience is the sort of button on it that this dream is about integration. And though the image that Courtney picked is in fact kind of kooky, funny, and weird, it is still at the heart of it a symbol of integration that will lead to a new transcendent third created when the female kitty gets pregnant and has a litter, which happens off stage when the dream is over.
I cannot believe you were able to tie that all together.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Zoe. Kooky dream, and we had some fun with it.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.